8th Congressional District debate.
Well, good evening and welcome to WDIO's 8th Congressional District debate. I'm Bailey Warfield.
And I'm Darren Danielson. For the next 40 minutes, you'll hear from the two candidates vying for the seat in 3 weeks coming up, less than 3 weeks now. Democratic State Representative Jen Schultz and incumbent Republican Congressman Pete Stauber are both here in our WDIO studio, prepared to answer the questions, some of which you actually crafted for us at home.
And both candidates have agreed to the ground rules and procedures for this commercial-free debate. Each candidate will give a 1-minute opening statement. We have prepared a list of questions, and each candidate will have a minute to respond, alternating who answers first. Each candidate can then offer a 30-second rebuttal. When this debate concludes, we will offer each candidate a 1-minute closing statement. Both candidates understand that when their time runs out, their mics can be cut off, and we will move on to the next question. We want to keep things moving.
I'm sure that won't be necessary,
No.
but you never know with live debates. All right, let's begin. Congressman Stauber, you have been chosen to deliver your opening statement first. Your 1 minute starts now.
Well, good evening, and thanks to WDIO and Darren and Bailey for moderating this event, and to our viewers watching tonight. And I also want to welcome my opponent to the studio in her first congressional debate. You know, when I talk to my constituents, they are worried. Inflation is skyrocketing. Minnesota families are feeling enormous pain at the pump every time they fill up their gas tank. And now Minnesotans can expect record heating bills this winter as Joe Biden takes us further into a recession. Rather than issue a blank check, Congress must provide checks and balances to Joe Biden's failed economic and energy policies that are costing every Minnesota family an additional $6,000 per year. But the good news is that it doesn't have to be this way. With your help, we can turn this around. I look forward to tonight's discussion on how we can get America back on track.
Thank you, Congressman. Representative Schultz, your 1 minute starts now.
Well, first I want to thank WDIO, Darren, and Bailey for hosting this event. I'm Jen Schultz, and I'm running for Congress to solve problems and get things done. For the last 8 years, I've served as a state representative, all while serving in a divided legislature, working with people from all parties. I grew up in a rural community, raised by a single mother. I know how to solve problems, and I've learned this throughout my term in office. We've been endorsed by 7 of the largest newspapers throughout the district and by many, many labor organizations. I put myself through college and went to graduate school at the University of Minnesota, and as an economist, I know how to work on the issues that are of concern to you in Washington. I've traveled throughout the district, and what I hear from people is that people are tired of the polarization. They want elected officials to deliver results, not play politics.
Thank you very much to both of you. Now, let's get to our first question, which we haven't even started yet. According to an August 2022 Statista survey, the most important problem facing the country today, according to this survey, is the collective dissatisfaction with the government and poor leadership. Now, you're both elected officials, both federal and state, active members of government, and this survey says, in general, that you are the serious problem facing the country, and that Congress is helping to drive the divisiveness in America. So, how will you help fix this? What would you do in Congress to change the negative perception that are in the minds of apparently many Americans? Representative Stauber, you have 1 minute to answer the first question.
Well, I agree the divisiveness in Washington must stop. We have to work together to promote good policies, good energy policies, economic policies that move America forward. I've witnessed the divisiveness, but within my own sphere of influence, I work along across aisles with both Democrats and Republicans, and I get legislation across the finish line to be signed into law. One of the things that I want to really do is build relations with others across the aisle, and that's what I'm doing. I have good friends. We can disagree on important issues, but we don't have to lose the civility in our conversations with each other. We all want the same thing for our country. We want to make it better, stronger, and leave a future more prosperous than the greatest generation gave it to us. So my commitment is to work across the aisle to benefit the youth.
Representative Schultz, you have 1 minute.
Thank you for that question. It is a concern for everybody in the district as I've traveled throughout. I have 8 years experience of only working in a divided legislature, and I've been very successful at getting local projects done. We've invested in our local hospitals in Duluth. We are cleaning up the St. Louis River with my work as a Great Lakes Commissioner, working with people across the aisle from 8 other states and 2 Canadian provinces. I've only worked in the divided legislature, meaning I'm working with Republicans in the Senate and Republicans in the House. In fact, in a contentious year, I was able to pass 2 large health and human services bills to help people who are suffering from drug addiction, mental health issues, homelessness, public safety. I'm proud of this work, and I want to go to DC to build relationships like I have the last 8 years to get things done for you, because I really want to strengthen our communities and invest in things that we all care about.
Congressman Stauber, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal if you wish.
Well, the fact of the matter is I'm doing that in Washington, D.C. right now, reaching across the aisle, building relations and really true relations with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle so we can promote good legislation that's good for the country and moves us all forward.
And Representative Schultz, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal if you wish.
Well, thank you. I am very interested tonight to hear about my opponent's success in Congress in his 4 years. I believe he's accomplished very little. He's been very partisan in playing politics and blaming others. I want him to tell us what his solutions are and what he's actually accomplished in his 4-year career.
Well, thank you both. Moving on, many Minnesotans' top concern is trying to make ends meet. The rising price of gasoline, groceries, heating bills expected to increase. The overall cost of living keeps going up. Several times this year, the Fed has raised the interest rate to try to cool off our economy. Is this the best option we have today, or how do we fix inflation? Representative Schultz, you have 1 minute to answer.
Well, I was raised by a single mother who raised me and my sister, and my mother divorced my father because he suffered from alcoholism, and we were poor. I know what it's like to struggle. I know what families are experiencing through the 8th because I'm listening to people. And we can solve this problem. I'm an economist. I understand what we need to do to mitigate any signs of further inflation or recession. And I know how important it is to have affordable housing, affordable health care, and affordable child care. Unfortunately, my opponent has voted against bills to address inflation. He voted against cheaper drugs, lower health insurance premiums, debt reduction, money for people who are struggling to pay their heating bills, protections from price gouging corporations, and he voted against incentives to use our domestic minerals. He's voting against labor, against working families, against older adults, against the Iron Range.
Representative Stauber, your thoughts?
Well, you know, inflation is crushing Minnesota families and Americans in general. And it has to do with Biden's failed energy and economic policies. Remember, 5 hours after Joe Biden was sworn in, he declared war on American energy by stopping the XL Keystone Energy. And he continues to do that today. He has banned federal oil drilling on federal lands. That's unacceptable. We need to be energy independent once again, and we have to have the political will to do it. When he stops energy production, traditional energy production in America, it's costing us all. Look at what we're paying for gasoline, record high prices for gasoline. Heating oil and natural gas is going to go through the roof this winter because of Joe Biden's failed energy policies. We need to be energy independent. We have the ability to do that. We have to have the political will to do so.
Representative Schultz, you have 30 seconds if you'd like to respond.
Well, the people of this district are smart enough to know that it's not just one person, our president. He does not control gas prices. My opponent takes lots of money from fossil fuel companies. We should ask him to ask these companies, why are they exporting so much fossil fuel outside of the U.S.? President Biden is releasing 15 million gallons from our strategic petroleum reserve. That's going to help us. But it's two countries, Saudi Arabia and Russia. They're limiting the supply of petroleum, and that's affecting our gas prices. We need to go after price gouging.
All right, thank you. Mr. Stauber, your rebuttal?
The fact of the matter is, American energy is abundant. We have to have the political will to do it. We have more energy in the Permian Basin and eastern New Mexico than all OPEC nations put together. We can't have the President of the United States going to beg OPEC nations for oil. And now he's going to Iran and Venezuela to beg for oil. We have the opportunity to be energy independent here. We just have to have the political will to drill in America.
All right, as we mentioned earlier, we asked our WDIO audience to send in questions for this debate tonight. So here is a first question from one of our viewers, Mike Pappas, who writes, the voters of Northeast Minnesota are sending the winning candidate to Washington to consider their needs. What legislation do you plan to introduce that will improve quality of life in northeastern Minnesota? Congressman Stauber, you have 1 minute to answer.
First off, Darren, we have to stop the reckless spending coming out of Washington, which has skyrocketed inflation. And we also have to have the political will to mine the critical minerals here in the United States. You know, we have the biggest copper nickel find in the world. We have 95% of the nation's nickel reserve, 88% of the cobalt, over a third of the copper and other platinum group metals right here in the Duluth complex. We have to mine those minerals if we're going to transform over to alternative sources of energy. This president pulled 2 federal leases for political reasons only and didn't allow the environmental impact statement to move forward. That's creating great paying jobs. That's $1 billion industry for the Iron Range every year, and this president simply will not allow that. He must get on the side of the American worker.
And Representative Schultz, you have 1 minute to answer our viewer question, please.
Well, we need to diversify the jobs in the entire district. That's what people need. We need to strengthen our mining and our mining industry, and we need to move forward by investing in the research and the technology that's needed for the science to make sure we can do mining safely. And I know that can be done. My opponent has done nothing to invest and has done nothing for our miners and our mining industry, but people need affordable housing. They need affordable health care. They need affordable child care. We need to make these key investments in education for our region to succeed. I want to make sure we're investing even in our smallest communities. I was up in Baudette, and I can see what happens when we have good schools. I met a couple who moved to Baudette. They had a choice between South Dakota and Baudette. They chose Baudette because they have good schools, and now they opened up 2 successful businesses. We can do that throughout the district, but we need people to go to D.C. and work hard for everyone.
All right. Well, Congressman Stauber, you have 30 seconds here in our budgeted time for rebuttal to that.
It's interesting my opponent brings up mining. My opponent co-authored the most anti-mining bill in the history of the state of Minnesota. And she stands here tonight and talks about her support for mining. It couldn't be further from the truth. The fact of the matter is, inflation is causing a heartache for so many people. Our seniors are devastated because of the inflation, and what we need to do is bring these jobs back to America.
Representative Schultz, 30 seconds for you.
Yes, the Prove It First legislation should not be controversial. It is not controversial because everyone I talked to, I visited all of our mines, I visited with everyone on every side of the issue, and people all agree that we cannot pollute the water. This bill simply says that we need to do safe mining without polluting the water. It's not controversial. I want to do more for our mining industry. I have ideas. I want to work on what's called an iron air battery that takes our iron ore and makes hundreds of jobs available in the district.
Well, apparently we arrived at this topic naturally, but our next issue for the Iron Range and broader region, copper nickel mining. Right. It is a polarizing issue.
Very much so.
Those who support it say that it will add hundreds of good paying jobs and bring more than $500 million to the local economy. But opponents are concerned copper nickel mining carries too many risks of heavy metal water pollution that traditional iron ore mining does not. So the question is, can we move into copper nickel mining and protect northern Minnesota's critically important watershed? Ms. Schultz, you have 60 seconds.
Well, I've done my homework on this issue. I've been working on things like this for 8 years. Like I said, I've been to Twin Meadows, I've been to Polymet, I've been to Talon, which they want to mine nickel, and I've met with miners, the mining industry, environmentalists, people who are anti-mining, people who are pro-mining, and what we need is a champion to bring everyone to the table, including our tribes. If we don't all come to the table and work this out, it gets litigated in court and then mining doesn't happen. We need to figure out how to do it without polluting the water. NRI, a research institute affiliated with the University of Minnesota Duluth, has 4 technologies, but they need to scale up those technologies and they need federal investment to do that. My opponent has not done one thing to bring back that federal investment to help our researchers, our entrepreneurs figure this problem out. I have a long history of solving problems. I want to solve this problem too.
Thank you. Congressman Stauber.
The answer is yes, we can do both. We can have a clean environment and mine here in northeastern Minnesota. We've been doing it for 135 years, and we have the cleanest water in the state right in the heart of the Iron Range. Mining helped win us 2 world wars. And now we're in the alternative energy transition. We need these critical minerals. We need the copper, we need the nickel, we need the cobalt, we need the other platinum group metals that we use in our everyday life. My opponent has built her political career in St. Paul with anti-mining activists. Again, she co-authored the most anti-mining piece of legislation in this state's history. What we need to do is mine safely using the best environmental standards and the best labor standards. We have the technology. We can use 21st technology to increase our mining, and we can do that right here in Minnesota and on the Iron Range and bring great paying jobs.
Representative Schultz, 30 seconds to respond.
Well, my opponent voted against the CHIPS Act. He voted against the Inflation Reduction Act. All of these things had incentives to use our domestic minerals to bring back domestic manufacturing. He is an anti-jobs congressperson because he's not supporting development and research and investments in bringing new jobs in mining in other fields to the district. Ask him what he has done. We have a mine idling. We have HIPTAC that could idle. We have the U.S. Steelworkers trying to negotiate a contract with U.S. Steel. What has he
Time is up. Any additional thoughts from you, Congressman?
Mining is our past, our present, and our future. I can assure you that our future is bright. The Iron Range is going to lead the alternative energy transition just like we did in the early 1800s. We are going to start mining critical minerals, and we're going to do it right. We're going to bring great paying jobs, and we're going to build up the Iron Range economy like it should be. We cannot allow the anti-mining and anti-jobs group to dominate.
All right, thank you very much, both of you. Our next question is about abortion rights. Simply put, do you consider the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade as a victory or a setback for America, and why? Representative Stauber, you respond first.
I recognize this is a deeply personal issue. My wife and I have 5 children and 1 that's adopted. We also have a special needs child who brings us joy every day. I believe in the sanctity of life. I believe that every life matters. And I am proud to be pro-life. But what I don't support is Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, and my opponent's position on abortion, which is taxpayer-funded abortion on demand, without limits, up until the moment of birth.
Representative Schultz, your 1 minute starts right now.
I believe that is a setback, the ruling of the Supreme Court. I am the only pro-choice candidate in this race. I support our rights to abortion and our rights to contraception. My opponent even voted against our right to contraception. He's allowed states to ban abortion even without exceptions for rape or incest. He said that he wanted states to make the decision. Then my opponent signed on to the national ban on abortion, which criminalizes physicians for providing reproductive health care. I will not allow us to go back 50 years. Women are not second-class citizens. We need to defend our right to privacy, our right to access to reproductive health, our right to choose, and our right to contraception. I believe that we have to codify this, and that's the first thing I will do when I get to Congress, is codify Roe v. Wade to make sure that restore rights to those that have been taken away in other states.
30-second rebuttal time for Congressman Stauber on this issue.
Again, I don't agree with Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, and my opponent's extreme position on abortion, which is taxpayer-funded abortion on demand without limits up until the moment of birth.
All right, well, for the rebuttal time, Representative Schultz, you have 30 seconds in your budgeted time.
Well, that is not true. Only 1% of abortions occur after 21 weeks. My opponent is, again, consistent at least by misinforming the public and spreading disinformation. We do not believe that women are using abortion for birth control. That is simply not true. Many abortions, it's a medical procedure. It's used to protect the life of the mother. Many women are sad when they have a late-term abortion. They've decorated the nursery. They're preparing for that child.
Thank you, Representative Schultz. Thank you. Election integrity continues to be debated as we head into this midterm election. So this prompted another question from a WDIO viewer. Carolyn from Silver Bay asks, do you believe President Biden won the election in 2020? Representative Schultz, you may respond first. Your 1 minute begins now.
Yes, President Biden won the election. Unfortunately, my opponent believes in the big lie. He signed on to the Texas lawsuit that tried to invalidate the presidential election. In fact, he has voted against voting rights. He voted against an election reform bill that would protect and increase the security of our presidential election. He is trying to take away our fundamental right to vote. He wants to get rid of same-day voter registration, something we've had for 50 years, something that is safe. There is very little voter fraud occurring. It's often just people make simple mistakes. We have a very safe and secure election process in Minnesota. I'm proud about the number of people who come out to vote. I hope we have a very high voter turnout this year in the midterm. So please remember to vote early or vote on November 8th.
Representative Stauber, do you believe President Biden won the election in 2020?
Americans know that Joe Biden is president every time they fill up their gas tank with record high gas prices. Americans know every time they pay their monthly heating bill, Joe Biden is president. Americans know every time they go to the grocery store and pay 3 and 4 times higher for groceries, they know Joe Biden is president. And every time Americans turn on the evening news and see our wide open southern border, allowing 100,000 illegal immigrants to enter our country. Some are drug runners, some are violent criminals, some are human traffickers. Americans know Joe Biden is our president because they're feeling the pain every day.
Ms. Schultz, you have 30 seconds to respond if you'd like.
Well, my opponent needs to remember who he's running against. He's not running against Biden or Nancy Pelosi. He's running against me. And I have 8 years of experience. I supported an automatic voter registration bill. I want to make it easier for people to vote. When they automatically register, when they renew or they start a driver's license, people can check multiple identification purposes. It is a safe way. Also, I'd like to hear what the solutions are to the problems that my opponent keeps addressing.
Mr. Stauber, you have the opportunity to respond now for 30 seconds.
Again, Americans are feeling the pain as Joe Biden punishes them with the highest inflation in 40 years, record high gas prices, record high energy prices. America knows Joe Biden is president because they're feeling the pain every day.
Well, moving on to our next question. U.S. News and World Report put together a report that was actually ranking the quality of life in all the countries in the world, and the key aspects considered included access to quality food, good housing, quality education, access to good health care, good jobs, low crime rates, a healthy environment, and strong individual freedom. Here's what the report said. Sweden ranked as the #1 country on the planet for quality of life for its citizens, followed by Denmark. Then Canada came in at #3. America came in at number 21. Our question to both of you: what will it take to improve the quality of life for our citizens to move us at least into the top 10 ranking of this particular kind of survey? Congressman Stauber, you have the first answer here. 60 seconds starting right now.
We have a lot of work to do on this issue. America should lead in every category across the board. America's leadership has been diminished because of Joe Biden. What we need to do right now is come together, allow a free, a prosperous nation with more opportunities, giving our young people hope. We live in the best country in the world. But what's happening right now is the high crime rates that are happening. Darren, you mentioned the crime rates. It's unfortunate that the defund and the disarm police movement has been devastating to our safety within our communities. My opponent voted to disarm and voted to defund the police. That's having real consequences across our country. That's what we're seeing, the chaos in the rising crime across our communities.
Representative Schultz, you have 60 seconds to answer that question for us, please.
Yes, we are one of the wealthiest countries, and no one should have to struggle. So I know what it was like to be poor when I was young. My mother became a successful person after she went to school, got educated, got a job. She raised 2 successful daughters. I know how hard I worked to put myself through college with grants and student loans. I know that the government can be a force for good. I know how the government can work with all of us to do good things. People want investments in their schools. People want investments so they can afford a house. They want people to move to this district, to find a job in this district, to raise their children in the district. This is what is important to most people in the district. And what we need to do is we need to fund paid family leave. Most countries have it. We need to make sure everyone has access to high quality health care. We have many areas in our district that are very rural that don't have good access to health care. That has to be a priority.
Well, Congressman Stauber, you have 30 seconds opportunity to rebut that particular question, please.
Again, we have a lot of work to do to bring this nation back to prosperity. We have to have good policies, good sound policies, economic policies, energy policies, crime. We have to reduce crime. We have to not allow criminals, not allow drug dealers to run our streets. The most important issue when you ask Americans is safety for them and their families. When a single mother can't go to the playground because she's concerned that her children are going to be assaulted or hurt, that's not right in our country. We can do better than that.
Representative Schultz, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Well, a lot of that is not true. I voted in favor of investing $340 million in policing, law enforcement, public safety when every House Republican voted no. My opponent voted no on a $350 billion investment in law enforcement, so I don't know how he can stand there and say he supports our police, he's worried about crime, when he voted against a huge investment to help our police address all of the concerns that we're facing.
Moving forward, in August, President Biden announced his decision to cancel up to $10,000 in student loan debt for individuals making less than $125,000 a year, or as much as $20,000 for eligible borrowers who were also Pell Grant recipients. Do you support this student loan forgiveness plan? Representative Schultz, 1 minute starts now.
Well, we have to address the underlying problems of why higher education is so expensive. As a college professor for the last almost 20 years, it is really awful to see students struggling to pay for their housing, to have to go to food shelves to support themselves. or to work almost full-time and go to school full-time. It needs to be more affordable. We need to address the underlying costs of higher education and, frankly, all types of training to get students ready for the workforce, ready to be a productive citizen in this country. I am really sad to say that my opponent had an $80,000 loan was forgiven, and at almost the same day, he came out against student loan debt forgiveness when he himself benefited from a loan forgiveness program. I'm all about supporting our businesses, and I'm glad we had those loan programs to get people through a very trying period in this country. But to say that is
all right. Representative Stauber, your 1 minute clock starts now.
First off, I want to go back to the last question. I want to be crystal clear. My opponent publicly pledged to an anti-police group that she was going to defund the police, end cash bail, allow felons to vote, end minimum sentencing, and release violent criminals from jail. That's a fact that she publicly pledged to an anti-policing group. Now to this question. No person who didn't go to college should have to be forced to pay for a student loan for another student. That's unfair. Why would you allow a grandmother in Hinckley to force her to pay for someone else's student loans? That's just not fair. People, what we have to do is actually ask ourselves, why is college tuition outpacing inflation on average the last 10 years? It's got to be more affordable.
All right, thank you, Congressman. Ms. Schultz, you have 30 seconds to respond.
I have never been in front of an anti-policing group, so I have no idea what my opponent is talking about. My husband is a criminologist. I learn about policing every day. I 100% support our law enforcement. My late father is a retired firefighter and EMT. I know that we have problems because we can't fill positions. We need to make sure we're investing so we can hire the best and the brightest to protect our communities. I will always fight for our first responders and for our law enforcement.
Mr. Stauber, you also have 30 seconds for a student loan forgiveness rebuttal.
First off, here's my opponent's public pledge to this anti-policing group. The fact of the matter is, what we need to do is we have to look at the root cause of the cost of education, and again, why it's outpacing inflation. And it's got to be more affordable, but we also have to look at the opportunities that career and technical education can offer. There's a route for those people that are going to go to college, and then there's the building and construction trades.
To our next question. Per capita, the United States sends more people to prison than any other country in the world. Here in Minnesota, there have been complaints about prison overcrowding. We've had stories on that. So our question to both of you tonight, would you consider the incarceration rate in the U.S. and here in Minnesota a problem? And if so, what should be done? Representative Stauber, you're first to respond, please.
Well, Darren, I think the crime rate is going off the charts. It's because of the defund and disarm the police movement. You know, police retention, recruitment, and morale is at the lowest it's ever been. It's because of my opponent's agenda that is causing the chaos and crime to rise. I've talked to hundreds of police officers throughout the country. They're leaving the profession, and many young men and women don't want to come into police work because the defund, disarm, disrespect, and disparage the police that my opponent is leading. She publicly pledged to defund the police, end cash bail, allow felons to vote, end minimum sentencing, release violent criminals from jail. This was her public pledge in 2020 to an anti-policing group. The fact of the matter is we have to support our law enforcement, and the men and women in blue know that I have their backs.
And Representative Schultz, you have 1 minute for your answer, please.
Well, we do need to look at incarceration. We should talk about legalizing cannabis in this state and decriminalizing it. I think that could help. But what we don't want to do is privatize our prisons. We need to do rehabilitation of those who are incarcerated so they can, when they are released, they can be productive citizens, they can finish their education, and they can contribute to our tax base. Honestly, my opponent, he voted against the January 6th insurrection and the investigation. that injured 140 DC and Capitol Police, and it led to some deaths. He voted against the consideration of a package of bills to promote and invest in law enforcement, to invest in mental health professionals, getting them the training and the tools they need to respond to emergencies. So please look at our voting record, not at what he says, because his voting record is different than what he is saying.
Congressman Stauber, 30 seconds to respond.
You know, as a 23-year police officer, the police know I have their backs. I was on the front lines. I looked evil in the eye. We must invest in our police. We must stop the defund and disarm the police movement that my opponent is championed and has championed in St. Paul.
Representative Schultz, 30 seconds to respond, please.
Well, thank you. That is just not true. Last time I checked, my opponent was in Congress. He has the tools and the staff, and he has the ability to address incarceration, to address crime, and he has done absolutely nothing. I'm on record voting in favor of $340 million investment in our police, our law enforcement, our public safety. I'm on the record supporting issues when people face drug addiction or mental health. I'm voting for them.
Thank you, Representative Schultz. This will be our last question, and due to time constraints, we will not have time for a rebuttal here. But because of redistricting, the 8th now represents all the tribes of the Native peoples of Minnesota. There are many issues challenging Indigenous communities. One of the biggest is impoverishment and unemployment. How would you help bring more Native people out of poverty? Representative Schultz, you answer first here.
Yes, this is the first time all 7 tribes north of the Twin Cities are in this district. They are going to have a powerful voice. I'm going to make sure that they are heard. I've been visiting with all of our tribes, all of our tribal bands and nations to make sure I understand what their needs are, what their concerns are. In fact, in Grand Portage, they need a wastewater treatment facility. In Boys Fort by Net Lake, they have to drive 50 miles to vote. These are things we need to solve. They need better representation. My opponent doesn't show up. He's not having in-person public town halls. He's not going to the communities I'm going to. We need to make sure that you have someone that listens to you, someone that shows up, and someone that works hard to get things done. People want results. They want solutions. You can talk about crime all you want, but tell us what you're doing to solve the problem.
Representative Stauber, your time starts now.
Yeah, thanks for the question. This is an important question. I've built great relations with our Native American community. In fact, I just had dinner with the Minnesota Chippewa Tribe Executive Director last week, Kathy Chavers. We talked about in the next Congress how we can work together, how we can build relations, and actually put legislation forward that positively affects all of our tribes. One of the things that we must consider is our Native American community, many of the members own, like for instance, construction companies. Now, line 3 that my opponent did not support, line 3 had Native American business owners working on that line 3, making good money, bringing wages to our economy. That's what we have to support. We have to support this infrastructure. We have to support the mining. Our Native American community deserves it, and I'm going to continue to build relations with my friends.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground here, and our 40-minute debate is nearing an end. Now it's time for each candidate to offer their closing statements. Representative Schultz, you have 1 minute for your final remarks.
Thank you. This election, you have a clear choice. My opponent, who the 7 largest papers in the district that previously endorsed him said he's too partisan and unresponsive to his constituents, who takes corporate money he's bought by corporations, who doesn't show up, who has accomplished almost nothing. Or you can vote for me, someone who has a proven record of solving problems, 8 years of working across the aisle to get things done. I am not bought by corporate interests. I'm not accepting any corporate PAC money. I'm going to be accountable to you, the voter. I'm going to get things done. I'm going to show up. I'm going to listen. I'm going to work for everyone, because I believe when we invest in our communities, when we invest in people, we all do better. I'm going to work for your support and your vote. Thank you.
Representative Stauber, your turn to give us your closing thoughts.
Well, again, thanks for everybody who was watching tonight. And I believe in the workers. I believe in our mining and our manufacturing and all the industries that are abundant here in the Northland. I believe in working families. You are doing everything you can to stay afloat in Biden's failed economy, which is costing
in the area.
This is a special edition of WDIO News at 6. Good evening, I'm Darren Danielson. The day's news coverage coming right up, but at 6:20, we will transition into our WDIO News live election debate. You can see that we have everything in place for our 8th District Congressional debate right here in our WDIO studio. U.S. Congressman Pete Stauber, the Republican incumbent, is here, as is his challenger, current State Representative, Democrat Jen Schultz. We will begin our debate in about 20 minutes. But first,
This